Hey everyone, welcome back to Corporate Decoder, the place where we break down the financials of major companies. And let me tell you, this latest filing from CNS Pharmaceuticals Incorporated is a real roller coaster. We're talking about a company that is definitely in the thick of things, trying to make a name for itself in the competitive world of cancer drug development. So, what is the big story here? Well, it seems like CNS Pharmaceuticals Incorporated is facing a constant uphill battle, managing its finances between big development expenses and crucial funding rounds. They're showing us their latest financial health check, and it is a narrative of big dreams, big costs, and the perpetual quest for cash. This document, a quarterly report on Form 10Q, gives us a snapshot of how CNS Pharmaceuticals Incorporated is doing financially as of the 30th of September, 2025. Think of it like a checkup for the company, showing us its assets, its debts, and how much it earned or lost over the last few months. Let's start with the balance sheet, which is like a company's net worth statement. As of the 30th of September 2025, CNS Pharmaceuticals Incorporated had about $9.8 million in cash and cash equivalents. That is a pretty good chunk of change, showing they have some immediate funds to work with. But when you look at the total assets, which stood at nearly $12 million, you see that most of their assets are actually current assets, meaning they are expected to be used up or converted to cash within a year. This is pretty typical for a pharmaceutical company heavily invested in research and development. On the other side of the coin, their total liabilities were just under $2 million. This is good news, as it means their debts aren't overwhelming their assets at this point. The real interesting part is in the stockholders' equity. After accounting for all the stock and outstanding shares, they actually have a positive stockholders' equity of about $9.9 million. This is a positive sign, showing that even with all the expenses, the company has a healthy cushion. Now let's dive into the income statement, or as they call it, the statement of operations. This is where we see if the company is making or losing money. For the 3 months ending the 30th of September 2025, CNS Pharmaceuticals Incorporated reported a net loss of about $3.2 million. That might sound bad, but remember, this is a company developing drugs, which is a very expensive and long process, compared to the same period in the previous year where they had a net loss of about $5.6 million. So they've actually reduced their losses, which is a step in the right direction. Looking at the longer 9-month period, the net loss was around $9.9 million for 2025. This is also an improvement compared to the $11.7 million loss in the same period of 2024. This trend of reducing losses year over year is definitely something to watch. The majority of these losses come from their research and development expenses, which are the costs associated with developing their potential new drugs, and their general and administrative expenses, which cover things like salaries, legal fees, and overhead. The statement of stockholders' equity shows how the owner's stake in the company changes over time. We see here that they issued quite a bit of common stock in exchange for cash, especially in 2025. For example, during the first 9 months of 2025, they issued common stock and warrants for cash, bringing in over $13.5 million. This is crucial for a company like this, as it is their primary way of getting the funds needed for all their research and development. They also had events like stock splits, which is when the company decides to increase the number of shares outstanding by splitting existing shares. This often happens when a stock price gets very high and they want to make it more accessible to a broader range of investors. They've had a few of these reverse stock splits, which is the opposite, consolidating shares to potentially increase the stock price. This entry, common stock issued for cashnet, is a really important one for us to track. It tells us how much money they've raised by selling new shares of their stock. During the 9 months ended the 30th of September 2025, they raised over $9 million through their sales agreement with AGP/Alliance Global Partners. This is how they keep the lights on and fund those hefty research and development costs. They also had another offering in May 2025 that brought in over $4.5 million. Now let's talk about how they compensate their employees and important folks. They have 2 main stock plans, the 2017 plan and the 2020 plan. These plans allow the company to grant stock options and other awards. For the 9 months ending the 30th of September 2025, they recognized about $60,000 in stock. Base compensation related to stock options. That might seem small, but there is also about $35,000 in unrecognized expenses for outstanding options. This means they still owe this compensation in the future. It is a way to incentivize people to stay with the company and work towards its success. Warrants are like options, but they're typically issued to investors alongside other securities like stocks or bonds. They give the holder the right to buy a company's stock at a specific price. The table here shows their warrant activity. At the end of 2024, they had over 5,000 warrants outstanding. By the 30th of September 2025, They had granted a lot more, but also exercised a significant number, reducing the outstanding warrants to about 334,000. They received a small amount of cash from warrant exercises, just over $3,600. These warrants can be a source of funding and also show investor confidence. Restricted stock units, or RSS, are another form of stock-based compensation. These are essentially shares of stock that are granted to employees but cannot be sold until certain conditions are met, like staying with the company for a specified period, for the 9 months ending the 30th of September 2025. They recognized about $42,000 in stock-based compensation from RSUs. And again, there are still unrecognized expenses attached to these awards. Performance units are a bit more complex as they vest based on the company hitting specific performance targets like stock price goals or achieving clinical trial milestones. For the 9 months ending the 30th of September 2025, they reported $0 related to performance units and also $0 in unrecognized expenses. This suggests that either none of these units are currently active or they haven't met the performance criteria yet. Now let's look at some of the people driving this company. Mr. John Climaco, the Chief Executive Officer, has an employment agreement that was extended. His annual base salary was set to $580,000, retroactive to the 1st of January 2025. They also approved cash bonuses totaling over $630,000 for the officers. This shows the company is investing in its leadership team. This is where things get interesting from a business strategy perspective. CNS Pharmaceuticals Incorporated has licensed intellectual property related to their drug candidate TPI-287 from Cortis Biosciences Incorporated. This agreement involves not just upfront payments, but also potential milestone payments and royalties. They issued over 950 shares of their common stock as part of this deal, and there are significant milestone payments tied to things like FDA approval or first commercial sales. They've also got a license for beribicin, another drug candidate, and have seen some mixed results from their trials. While the top-line data from a recent trial showed comparable outcomes to a standard treatment, it did not demonstrate a statistically significant difference in overall survival. The primary goal. This means the path forward for beribicin might be uncertain, and they are still evaluating potential next steps with the FDA. Looking at the operational expenses, general and administrative costs decreased in the third quarter of 2025 compared to 2024, going from about $1.38 million down to around $1.06 million. This reduction was mainly due to lower legal and professional costs, and notably decreased stock-based compensation. On the flip side, they saw increases in travel and compensation expenses. The big hitter here is always research and development. For the third quarter of 2025, R&D expenses were roughly $2.2 million, a significant drop from nearly $4.25 million in the same quarter of 2024. The primary reason for this decrease is lower trial costs for their beribicin drug and reduced expenses related to TPI-287. Partly because some of the costs related to in-licensing TPI-287 were in the prior year. Because of these lower expenses, particularly in R&D, the net loss for the third quarter of 2025 was about $3.2 million, a welcome decrease from the $5.6 million loss in the third quarter of 2024. This improved financial performance is a positive signal, even though they are still operating at a loss, which is expected for a company in this stage of development. When we talk about liquidity, we're talking about how much cash a company has readily available to meet its short-term obligations. As of the 30th of September 2025, CNS Pharmaceuticals Incorporated had about $9.8 million in cash. They estimate that this cash, along with their forecasted income, will be enough to fund their operations into the second half of 2026. However, they also acknowledge that bringing TPI-287 to regulatory approval will require significant additional financing, and there is no guarantee they can secure it on favorable terms or at all. This uncertainty is a major risk factor for the company. The statement of cash flows tells us where the company's money came from and where it went. For the first 9 months of 2025, they used about $10.7 million in operations. This outflow is mainly due to clinical trial costs, drug manufacturing, salaries, and other operational expenses. The good news is that their financing activities provided a significant inflow of about $14.1 million, primarily from selling common stock. This is how they are covering their operational deficits. This section on internal controls is quite serious. Management found that their disclosure controls and procedures were ineffective due to material weaknesses. These weaknesses include a lack of segregation of duties, which is common in smaller teams. Issues with getting timely and complete information from their contract research organization managing their studies, and a general lack of formal documentation for their control environment. They are taking steps to address these issues, but it highlights the challenges of growing a company while maintaining robust financial controls. And now, the risk factors section, this is where the company lays out all the ways things could go wrong. And for CNS Pharmaceuticals Incorporated, there are quite a few. A major one is maintaining compliance with the Nasdaq Capital Markets listing requirements. They've had issues in the past with minimum bid prices and stockholder equity. And while they are currently in compliance, there is a constant threat of delisting if they can't maintain these standards. Delisting would make it much harder to raise money and could significantly impact their stock value. They also mention the inherent risks in drug development, regulatory hurdles, competition, and intellectual property protection. So, what is my take on CNS Pharmaceuticals Incorporated based on this report? They are clearly in a high-risk, high-reward industry. They've managed to reduce their net losses sequentially, which is a positive sign. Their ability to raise capital through stock sales is critical and has been successful so far, providing them with the runway needed for their development programs. However, the significant R&D costs, the uncertainty surrounding the beribicin trial results, and the constant need for future funding are substantial risks. Their Nasdaq listing status is also a recurring concern. The company's direction seems focused on advancing TPI 287 and beribicin, but the clinical trial outcomes and the ability to secure future funding will be the deciding factors in their success. Without a strong clinical validation for their lead candidates and a clear path to profitability, they will continue to rely heavily on equity financing, which can dilute existing shareholders. Overall, CNS Pharmaceuticals Incorporated is in a precarious but potentially very rewarding position. They are navigating the complex and expensive landscape of pharmaceutical development. And while they've shown some progress in managing their financials and reducing losses, the significant risks associated with drug trials, regulatory approvals, and ongoing financing needs cannot be overstated. It is a company that is definitely one to watch, but with caution. Alright, that is our breakdown of CNS Pharmaceuticals Incorporated's latest filing. What is your take on these numbers and what they signal for the company's future? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If this analysis was valuable, hitting that like button really helps, and subscribe for more deep dives. Don't forget to check out the Discord in the description. Thanks for watching. See you next time.